What if everything in your life fell apart? Your family betrayed you, you were sold as a slave, thrown into prison for a crime you didn't commit, yet, in the end, you became one of the most powerful leaders in the world. This is the unbelievable story of Joseph. He went from being a favored son to a forgotten prisoner, but against all odds, he rose to become the governor of Egypt. How did he endure such suffering without losing faith? What was the hidden purpose behind his trials? And most importantly, what does his story reveal about your struggles and God's plan for your life? In this video, we're unlocking the secrets behind Joseph's incredible rise from the lowest pit to the highest throne. You'll discover shocking details about his betrayal, the temptations he resisted, the dark years he spent in prison, and the moment everything changed. But this isn't just history. Joseph's journey holds powerful lessons for you. Have you ever felt abandoned? Have you faced injustices that made you question your purpose? What if, like Joseph, your greatest struggles are actually preparing you for something greater? Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to hear might change the way you see your own trials. And before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. Let's share this message with those who need it most. Joseph was the beloved son of Jacob, and his father's special affection for him caused deep resentment and jealousy among his brothers. Jacob's love for Joseph was evident in the beautiful coat of many colors that he gave to him, a symbol of his unique place in Jacob's heart. Genesis 37 verses 3-4. This coat, however, became a point of contention. His brothers, feeling overlooked and angry, couldn't understand why Joseph was so favored. The tension between them grew, and their resentment turned into a desire to rid themselves of Joseph, whom they saw as a reminder of their father's preferential treatment. As the tension continued to build, the brothers' jealousy took a dangerous turn. One day, when Joseph went to check on them while they were tending to the flocks, his brothers saw an opportunity to strike. In Genesis 37 verses 18-28, the brothers plotted to kill him, but instead they decided to sell him as a slave to a group of Ishmaelite traders who were passing by. This cruel act, driven by jealousy, was a turning point in Joseph's life. It was a painful betrayal by those he had called family, and it marked the beginning of a series of trials that would shape his future. The moment Joseph was sold into slavery, his world as he knew it came crashing down. He was separated from his family and everything he had known, forced to travel with strangers into a foreign land. The pain of being sold by his own brothers, whom he trusted and loved, left a deep emotional scar. But in that moment of hardship, Joseph's life would take a dramatic turn, one that would ultimately lead to his rise to power in Egypt. Little did he know that this dark chapter would eventually play a pivotal role in God's greater plan for his life. As Joseph was sold into slavery, he experienced the raw emotions of abandonment, isolation, and betrayal. These emotions were undoubtedly difficult to bear, especially knowing that his brothers had been the cause of his suffering. Yet, through these painful experiences, Joseph learned valuable lessons that would prepare him for future challenges. His journey was just beginning, and although it seemed like everything was falling apart, it was actually the beginning of a journey that would define his character and destiny. This moment of betrayal and hardship also teaches us about the power of perseverance and faith. Joseph's resilience in the face of such hardship is a testament to his character and his ability to trust that there was a greater purpose at work. His story reminds us that even when we face betrayal and hardship, we can hold on to the hope that God is with us, guiding us through the darkest moments to something greater. After being sold into slavery, Joseph was brought to Egypt, where he was purchased by Potiphar, an official of Pharaoh and captain of the guard. Genesis 39 verses 1-6. Despite being a slave in a foreign land, Joseph quickly proved himself to be a man of remarkable integrity and ability. His hard work and trustworthiness earned him Potiphar's favor, and soon Joseph became in charge of all Potiphar's household. Potiphar recognized that everything Joseph did prospered because God was with him. Even as a slave, Joseph stood out for his character, which set him apart in a world where many others would have compromised their values. Joseph's success in Potiphar's house was not without its challenges. Potiphar's wife, noticing Joseph's good looks and trustworthy nature, began to make advances toward him. She attempted to seduce him, but Joseph firmly refused, explaining that it would be a great sin against God. Genesis 39 verses 7-9. He remained steadfast in his integrity, even though he was far from home and in a vulnerable position. His loyalty to both Potiphar and God guided his actions, and he chose righteousness over temporary pleasure, demonstrating his deep commitment to God's commandments. However, Potiphar's wife did not take kindly to being rejected. Embarrassed and angry, she falsely accused Joseph of attempting to assault her. She told her husband that Joseph had tried to force himself on her, which led Potiphar to throw Joseph into prison, despite the fact that Joseph was innocent. This was a devastating and unjust turn for Joseph, as he had done nothing wrong, yet found himself imprisoned in a foreign land, suffering the consequences of someone else's lies. Despite this injustice, Joseph did not let bitterness or anger take root in his heart. Instead of becoming discouraged or turning away from God, Joseph remained faithful and trusted that God had a plan for him. Even in prison, Joseph's character remained strong, and God continued to bless the work of his hands. His trust in God allowed him to maintain his integrity and hope, even in the most difficult of circumstances. Joseph's story shows that, although life can be unfair and full of challenges, faith and integrity can provide strength through adversity. Joseph's time in Potiphar's house and his wrongful imprisonment were critical experiences that shaped him for the future. They taught him the importance of trust, faithfulness, and integrity, values that would ultimately lead him to greater opportunities. While Joseph faced incredible setbacks, his unwavering commitment to God and his ability to remain true to his principles laid the foundation for his eventual rise to power in Egypt. This part of Joseph's story reminds us that even in the darkest times, God's presence can still guide us toward his greater purpose. After being falsely accused and thrown into prison, Joseph faced another difficult chapter in his life. Yet, even in the darkest place, he remained faithful to God and continued to show integrity. Despite being a prisoner, Joseph's character and skills quickly became apparent to the prison warden, who entrusted him with more responsibility. Genesis 39 verses 21-23. Joseph's ability to maintain his faith and work diligently, even in a seemingly hopeless situation, set him apart from others. He became a trusted figure within the prison, continuing to be a source of hope and leadership, showing that his relationship with God and his work ethic were not dependent on his circumstances. In the prison, Joseph's role expanded beyond just managing the prison. Two fellow prisoners, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker to Pharaoh, were also incarcerated. One night, both men had troubling dreams that they could not understand. When Joseph noticed their distress, he asked them about their dreams, and they shared them with him. Joseph, with God's help, interpreted the dreams accurately. The cupbearer would be restored to his position, while the baker would be executed. Genesis 40. Joseph's ability to interpret dreams was a gift from God, and it demonstrated his unwavering trust in God's guidance, even in the most dire of situations. Joseph's interpretation of the dreams came to pass exactly as he had said. The cupbearer was restored to his position, but the baker was executed. Before the cupbearer left, Joseph asked him to remember him and speak to Pharaoh on his behalf, hoping to secure his release from prison. Unfortunately, the cupbearer forgot about Joseph, leaving him in prison for 2 more years. Despite this, Joseph's faith never wavered. He continued to trust that God had a plan for his life, knowing that his time would come when the time was right. The episode with the cupbearer and baker set the stage for Joseph's eventual rise to power. His ability to interpret dreams was a crucial skill that would later be called upon when Pharaoh himself had a troubling dream. This was no coincidence. Joseph's time in prison and his interactions with the cupbearer and baker were divinely orchestrated to prepare him for the moment when he would be summoned to interpret Pharaoh's dreams. This shows that God uses even our most difficult situations to prepare us for the greater things ahead. Joseph's experience in prison highlights important lessons about patience, faith, and God's timing. Even though he was forgotten by the cupbearer and remained in prison longer than expected, Joseph did not lose hope. He continued to serve faithfully, knowing that God's plan was unfolding. This part of Joseph's story reminds us that even when it seems like we're stuck or overlooked, God is still working behind the scenes, preparing us for something greater. It teaches us to remain faithful in every circumstance, trusting that God's timing is always perfect. After 2 long years in prison, Joseph's moment finally came. Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, had a troubling dream that no one could interpret. The cupbearer, who had been restored to his position, remembered Joseph's ability to interpret dreams and mentioned him to Pharaoh, Genesis 41 verses 14 to 16. Pharaoh, desperate for answers, called for Joseph. Even though Joseph was still in prison, he was summoned to stand before the most powerful man in Egypt. This was a pivotal moment in Joseph's life, showing that even in the darkest times, God's plan is at work behind the scenes. When Joseph stood before Pharaoh, he humbly acknowledged that it was not he who could interpret the dream, but God who would provide the answer. With God's guidance, Joseph interpreted Pharaoh's dream, explaining that it foretold 7 years of abundant harvests, followed by 7 years of severe famine, Genesis 41 verses 16 to 30. Joseph not only provided the interpretation but also offered a solution. Egypt should store up grain during the years of plenty to prepare for the coming famine. This practical advice demonstrated Joseph's wisdom and his ability to think strategically, attributes that would prove invaluable in the coming years. Impressed by Joseph's wisdom and insight, Pharaoh promoted him to the second highest position in Egypt, governor, Genesis 41 verse 46. He gave Joseph authority over the land and placed him in charge of the grain storage program. Joseph, now dressed in fine garments and wearing a signet ring, was given a new name and a wife, marking his dramatic rise from prisoner to powerful leader. His new position allowed him to execute the plans he had devised, ensuring that Egypt would be prepared for the famine. Joseph's rise to power was a clear example of how God can use any situation, even one of hardship, to position his people for greater purposes. As governor, Joseph oversaw the collection and distribution of grain throughout Egypt. When the famine struck, as Joseph had predicted, Egypt was well stocked with grain, and people from all over the surrounding nations came to Egypt to buy food. This was a direct result of Joseph's leadership and foresight, and his actions saved countless lives, including those of his own family. His ability to lead effectively during a time of crisis demonstrated his God-given wisdom and helped to solidify his reputation as a leader of extraordinary ability. Joseph's rise to power not only changed his life but also saved nations from starvation. He used his influence wisely, ensuring that Egypt was prepared for the years of famine. His story is a powerful reminder of how God can turn even the most difficult circumstances into opportunities for growth and service. Joseph's faith, perseverance, and wisdom were key to his success, and his leadership during the famine became one of the most significant chapters in Egyptian history. Through his journey, we learn that with God's guidance, we can overcome any obstacle and achieve things far beyond our expectations. In conclusion, Joseph's journey is a powerful story of faith, perseverance, and forgiveness. From being sold as a slave by his own brothers to becoming the governor of Egypt, Joseph's life exemplifies how trusting in God can turn even the most difficult circumstances into opportunities for growth and success. Through his unwavering faith, Joseph rose above his hardships and helped save not only Egypt but also his own family during a time of great famine. His story is a testament to the power of God's plan, even when we face betrayal, suffering, and injustice. One of the key lessons we can learn from Joseph's life is the importance of trusting God during difficult times. Joseph faced numerous trials, but he remained faithful and obedient to God's calling. Whether he was in a pit, a prison, or a palace, Joseph trusted that God had a purpose for his life. We can apply this lesson in our own lives by choosing to trust in God's plan, even when we don't understand why things are happening. Joseph's life teaches us that our challenges can be part of a bigger story that God is unfolding. Another powerful lesson from Joseph's life is the importance of forgiveness. Despite being betrayed by his brothers, Joseph chose to forgive them, showing grace and mercy even when he had the power to take revenge. His willingness to forgive was a reflection of the love and forgiveness God offers to all of us. In our own lives, we may face situations where forgiveness seems impossible, but Joseph's example encourages us to release bitterness and choose forgiveness, knowing that it leads to healing and freedom. So, what can we learn from Joseph's life about overcoming adversity, staying faithful, and forgiving others? How can we apply these lessons in our own journeys? Joseph's story reminds us that no matter how hard life gets, we can overcome challenges with faith, trust in God's timing, and a heart that is willing to forgive. When we hold on to these principles, we can face life's difficulties with strength and hope, knowing that God is always working for our good. If you found Joseph's story inspiring, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more videos like this. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.